All right, everybody. So my name is Savannah Peterson. I'm the Student Affairs Manager at CCS. I'm also referred to as the lead advisor. And so part of what I do is help advise students about their college requirements in order to obtain their degree. So GEs, sometimes major requirements and just sort of general advice, but we also help advise students about what kinds of resources they might need access to or benefit from. So we're part of the staff that connect you to UCSB as a whole.
Hello, and I'm Megan Peterson, and I am one of the other staff advisors, and I do pretty much the same stuff as Savannah, just a team of support for you.
Go ahead, Caroline.
Oh, wait, we're going now. Okay, sorry. I'm Caroline. What is it, year major? No, year, what we're doing?
Yeah, just however you want to introduce yourself.
Okay, sweet. I'm Caroline. I'm a second year. I'm currently in a bio, what's it called? MCDB lab.
Hi, everybody. My name is Max Miskowski. I am a fourth year chemistry major in CCS. I actually graduated this last quarter, so I'm just here for kicks. In my free time, I run a section of the student newspaper. It's the satire section called Existentialism. And yeah, I think that's about it. Glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Thea. I'm a second year biochem major, and I enjoy running and hiking outside.
Thanks for introducing yourselves, guys, and we'll kind of, I know that you'll be able to speak more about what you do too as we go through these questions. So thank you for your introductions. So I just want to let people know, chat is open, obviously, because we're small. This isn't like an official webinar where you guys can't see each other. So feel free to use it. If you have questions along the way, or, sometimes we'll use it just to kind of like reinforce or offer additional resources on the side. So just want to make sure that you know that that's available for you. But what we're going to do is start diving into our questions. And the first one usually is very much along the lines of like the College of Creative Studies, right? And like what it was that really brought you into applying to CCS. So the first question is very much about that research, right? That's what a lot of students come to CCS because it's what they want to do. And so our question for our panelists is, what kind of research are you currently involved in? And when did you start it in the college?
So I can go first. I'm currently in Classic Lab at UCSB, which is focused on studying Alzheimer's and basically like figuring out how it spreads and why it progresses the way it does. I started freshman year, so around November, partially because in November, I was still on the fence of whether or not I wanted to be in CCS Chem or like try to transfer to CCS Bio. So I was taking all the bio classes along with all my chem classes, and they had a research symposium, which helps you get into research, and it's open to anybody to take, and that helped.
I actually am not involved with undergraduate research at UCSB. It's one of those things that a lot of CCS students get into, but I just never got around to it. I did do some research over the summer at a pharmaceutical company, but unfortunately, I did never end up working with professors on campus.
So I was in contact with a professor when the pandemic hit, and then everything basically closed and labs never reopened for at least this second year. So I haven't done anything personally. I am in contact with a different professor now, so I'm hopefully going to be in one when fall starts. But professors are usually very nice, and especially during the pandemic, they've been very nice about at least responding to the emails, if nothing else. So yeah.
What kind of lab or research are like you currently talking about, Thea, just to kind of paint a picture of like what's out there?
So I've been talking to Professor O'Malley, who I think is technically in the chemical engineering department. She does research about biofuel and like synthetic like organisms basically, and using they're trying to like replicate like the natural processes they do that allow them to be like anaerobic and stuff. So that's kind of what she's researching and what I've been trying to talk to that professor about. Yeah.
Very cool. So y'all touched on it a little bit, but how do you find research opportunities on campus, and how difficult are they to get? Do you receive emails with like an announcement that a position's open? Do you see it posted on a like literal board somewhere? Did your faculty advisor maybe tell you about an opportunity that might fit really well to you? How does it happen?
So from my experience, it was actually really informal. The stress of thinking about applying for it is the hardest part. Like once you actually send out an email, you can like just tailor it a little bit for every other lab you're into. And then it's easier to like, if you're scared of emailing professor, it's also totally fine just to email a postdoc in the lab. And they'll also most likely reply faster because they have less emails. But yeah, it's pretty informal. How I saw most people do it, you just like go to a website, see what research is available at UCSB, find a professor or a list of professors you're interested in, and then just email them. And then they'll talk to you about stuff like that. There's more official ways of doing it. Like I think there's something called a frat where you could apply and possibly get paid over the school year to do research. And there's a bunch of internships and scholarships at UCSB and CCS specifically as well. Like CCS has the Create Fund. And for example, I got a scholarship last year from the CSEP Foundation at UCSB, which is specifically for UCSB students. So basically, if you want to start getting into research, it's really easy to. If you want to get paid to do research, it's also, there are a lot of UCSB specific resources for you. You just have to apply to them.
Yeah, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. I was also in contact with a couple professors like immediately before the pandemic hit. But I think probably the best way to usually do it, which will apply to you guys when you come back to campus in the fall, is just walk to professors during their office hours. A lot of the times professors are super busy, so you'll end up doing a walk and talk meeting. But those are just as good. I know, like for instance, Dr. Lapperman is always swamped with emails because he's so busy, and that really applies to all of the other professors in the chemistry department. So really, I think the best strategy is to read up on their research and ambush them when they're in their office. And of course, email them too, but you know, ambushing is really a surefire way to get it done.
Yeah, I think just both that all that has been said is totally accurate. You can always start with emailing people. Obviously right now that's the only way to do it, but hopefully when we're back on campus, you can go to office hours is a really good way. And then another way that I've heard, I mean, Leroy can also always help you if you either have specific questions about research in an area or a specific lab, he can often help you, maybe get you connected or even just talk to you about it. Another way I've often heard people say they've found things is just their TAs for their lab sections. We'll talk about whatever research they're doing because they're usually in a lab on campus, and you can often go up to them and kind of engage and ask about it and get a connection that way. So that's another way to do it.
Yeah, TAs are definitely a great resource. I've been good friends with a couple of TAs, and they're really a great way to get a foot into a research lab, especially because, like Caroline said, they're often a lot more available than professors. And you end up spending a lot more like personal time around your TAs than you do around your professors, especially in like your lab classes or something, where you'll be in a group of like 12 people in a very small, bustling lab for like 8 hours a week. So they're great people to reach out to.
Max, I don't think you could have given me like a smoother transition into our next question, like if you tried. So our next question is about like class size. Perfect. Thank you. Basically, we wanted to give you guys an opportunity to talk about something that makes CCS, unique at UCSB, which has a lot to do with like class sizes and cohort size and the way that that sort of shapes your experience in your community. I mean, really just kind of elaborating on that. How large is a typical CCS class? Are the classes, the research projects, like, are they collaborative? Are they very independent and self-driven? What's the general vibe?
Oh, the classes are super small. They're smaller than my high school. Like DNI's year, we had 15 people in CCS Chem. Leroy usually likes keeping it around 10. It's just that our year more people like accepted than he expected. But usually if it's CCS Chem, which is going to be the Gen Chem series you guys are going to be in if you SIR, you should expect maybe like 10 people, a little bit less than 10 people. Labs, around 20 people. And as you go on in UCSB, you're going to have less CCS classes and more in letters and science. But those classes can also be small because as CCS students, you can also get into the honor sections, which are maybe like 30 people, I want to say. So yeah, classes are pretty small. You'll get to know your professors really well.
Yeah, I definitely will tell you guys you'll experience a breadth of different class sizes as you go throughout UCSB. You will avoid the brunt of the enormous classes by having CCS Gen Chem being taught to you your first year. I think my class was about 8 people. So it was all of us in the old little theater hanging out with Leroy. So that's a lot of fun, but definitely as you enter your second year and start taking the OChem series through LNS, your classes will be quite large, definitely a couple hundred students, usually about 200 to 300, I think. And that's just because OChem is one of those classes that a lot of different majors have to take, and same with Gen Chem. But as you progress later on into your education and start taking upper division chem classes, the other majors don't have those as requirements, so the classes tend to get a little bit smaller. I think that my main series classes are usually about 50 people, and that's just how many students happen to be in the chemistry major at UCSB in the letters and science colleges, plus the CCS Chem people, of course.
Pretty small courses, but also big ones too. So along the lines, of course, the CCS students take advanced courses and do research or are constantly making or constantly in the lab. How do you manage this workload along with extracurricular activities, and what do you do outside of CCS?
It used to be a lot easier before the pandemic, I'll be honest with you, because if you're in lab, usually you'll make your schedule in a way where you have maybe 3 hours every other day where you can just go into lab and do your like work. And then, oh, I mean research labs, by the way. Like you can just go in, get done, not think about it until like the next day you have to go in. So that's usually how you'd approach it, just scheduling your classes around it. That's obviously not going to be a big thing during the pandemic, but I think things will go back to normal for you guys next year. So that'll probably be how you guys approach it if you SIR and decide to do research. For me, I always approached it as like a 9 to 5, basically. Like, okay, I will treat this like a job. I will start at 9, I'll leave at 5. And if I have extra time in between, I'll do work so I don't have to do it later. And outside of CCS, it was mostly just research, and I write for the news section of the Daily Nexus, which is the UCSB newspaper. So yeah, also partially just being in UCSB, there's a lot of other activities like hiking. You go to Campus Point, you can rent out like literal kayaks and just go into the ocean and try fishing in the ocean with a rented kayak and stuff like that. So it's mostly just that.
Wow, I didn't know you were up for the news section. That's awesome. Come over to Stench sometime. Write a couple jokes for us. But let's see. The question was about scheduling, was it?
More
Sorry, I
about
forgot.
how do you balance your like heavy workload and research responsibilities with
Yeah.
like having a life and extracurricular activities?
Oh, yeah, of course. So I think pre-pandemic, I don't know if it was easier or harder, but it certainly was a little bit more convenient to have like the time of my life that I spend on campus fully devoted to doing my schoolwork and my homework and running the paper and doing all of that stuff. Especially since having moved online, it's become a little bit more difficult to like self-allocate my time if I can't block it all onto campus. Um, but I definitely think that like the act of like just staying on campus until you're done with everything you're done for the day, you're done with everything you need to get done for the day, was like always my go-to strategy. Like I would just block classes um, in the morning and the afternoon, and then spend the middle chunk of time that I had working on all my stuff while I'm there, so I could go home afterwards and be done. But also, since the pandemic hit and I had classes online for a whole year, that opened up some opportunities for me to take classes that would otherwise be mutually exclusive, like classes that overlapped a little bit, or classes that like were back to back to back, whereas otherwise I would need to like eat food during the day and like take that time for myself. So you know, there are pros and cons to online school and in-person instruction. You just kind of have to find them on your own.
I mean, yeah, kind of similar thing on campus. I think it's a lot easier to kind of block out your time because it's very much dependent on like moving from class to class or etc. So when I was on campus, I was obviously doing my schoolwork, and then I also had an on-campus job, and I was doing rowing, which is highly, you have to spend a lot of hours. It's like quite a few hours a week. We have morning practices at lakes we have to drive to, and weightlifting sessions, etc. So I was very busy, but even despite that, I was able to have time to go like to the beach a few nights a week and just play frisbee with my friends or go play board games. So like no matter how busy you seem, you definitely always have time. It's really about prioritizing mostly, obviously, kind of what you want to do, and then balancing it all out, and kind of choosing how much time you want to commit to something. Like I chose rowing, and I knew that was going to be a lot of time commitment, so it's just kind of choosing, because there are other sports that were less committed that I could have done. So I think it's really just about blocking out your days and prioritizing things, but it's all up to how you kind of want to create your schedule.
So our next question is about something that, is sort of easy to say in really big, broad strokes at CCS, and is sort of hard to make concrete and real. And it's something that a lot of CCS students ask about, prospective students especially, that CCS students have a thing that they're primarily interested in, right? And that's pretty standard. Some students discover things along the way, and that's totally legit too. But there's we often attract the kind of students who are also passionate about more than just one thing. And so we get this question of, I might have multiple interests, and how can I combine those at CCS, right? Like as I'm loving chemistry, can I also love biology? Can I also love computing? Or even something more fun like the newspaper. So maybe I'm preaching to the choir, but or asking the choir to testify, but how interdisciplinary is CCS really?
I think it's pretty interdisciplinary. It's not common to have a lot of people double major in CCS. I think there's for example, there's an upperclassman in CCS Chem named Alen who double majors in both chemistry and writing, I believe. And you'll often have other people like that. And it's also really easy to take CCS classes from different majors. You can take CCS writing classes. I think, Thea, were you in the CCS writing class with me spring quarter?
Yeah, I took,
Yeah.
or that was creative writing or whatever.
Yeah. So basically, you can, like, if you're interested in another CCS class, it's very easy to get into it. You just email the professor and is like, I'm interested in this. Can I have it? And they're like, yeah. So pretty interdisciplinary. And also considering that CCS has a specific, are they moving to Santa Rosa now, or is it still going to be in Manzi?
The current trajectory might be Santa Rosa. So the only reason I'm saying might is just because like the dean and I still have to meet with the director of housing to like officially nail it down, but it's leaning that way.
Okay.
Just because it would be closer to the building and have a little bit of a higher capacity too. So
yeah, but basically CCS has a specific what's called living learning center, where you can like move into a specific building with other CCS students, and usually you have a pretty good mix of different majors, and like you'll just talk to each other about what you're doing, and sometimes talking in between majors makes you interested in it, and that's how a lot of people get into taking interdisciplinary classes or even picking up a second major.
Yeah, I think it's fairly easy to pursue your outside interests at CCS. Really, CCS is just about as interdisciplinary as you make it. I mean, you can very easily just study the only thing that you want to study, but you can also very, very easily branch out. Really, all you have to do is talk to the professors of the classes that you want to take or that you're interested in, and they do usually want to let you into the class. You know, size limits notwithstanding. But you know, definitely like if you email CCS professors and tell them you're interested in and passionate about the subject and you want to learn more by taking their classes, like they will almost certainly, you know, want to let you in. So it's really, really not that hard to pursue your other interests within CCS because you have so many opportunities and connections within the college.
Yeah, not much to add to that. I mean, they kind of covered everything. Another thing I'd say is just because the CCS building is so small, you're always running into like people, or I used to hang out in the study room a lot, so you just like, you know, people constantly going in and out of there from all different majors. So you often would just like end up in conversations with people about like things they were studying or, you know, researching or whatever. So outside of like a specific like class environment, you're also just getting a lot of exposure through either your own curiosity or just generally with other students from different topics. So you, again, it's like also like kind of what you make of it. I mean, you could even probably follow like if you're interested and like if you hear about things or, you know, or just learn about cool things in your free time. But I think in that sense, it's also interdisciplinary.
Oh, I also thought of another point. CCS's major requirements are generally more flexible than if you were in letters and science. So you can pretty much tailor your curriculum a lot more to whatever you're interested in. For example, last quarter, I took some bioengineering courses or some neurobiology courses. Like if I was in the chem department in letters and science, I probably would have had my like schedule full and not had time to do that. But since your GE requirements and your general major requirements are a lot more flexible in CCS, you have a lot more freedom in tailoring it to what you're interested in.
Kind of piggyback off that real fast. I actually wanted to take some upper div bio classes, but to do that, you usually have to take the intro to bio series. I actually skipped the intro to bio series. I emailed a professor and was like, hey, I'm a CCS student. I took 2 years of IB biology in high school, passed the test, blah, blah, and they let me into the class without taking the prereqs. So there's also sometimes perks like that, where you can take something you're really interested in without the prereqs if it's not really that necessary or you already have some background in it. So that also allows you to kind of maybe explore other things that you wouldn't normally be able to do.
Back on Thea's point, I forgot about that. Upper divs are a lot easier to get into because part of it's also sometimes chem department's a bit like butthurt about prereqs, but you'll have Leroy have your back. Like I think last year there was a CCS chem student named Peachy who wanted to take an upper div in inorganic chem class and she couldn't get into it because the professor was like, you didn't take this prereq. And then Leroy put in a word and then she could take the class, basically. I think that's how it went. I heard it secondhand, but I'm not totally sure. But basically, it's easier to do. It's like you have people who will vouch for you, basically. And that'll make it easier for you to get operative classes.
I'll just jump in for Megan and I, because like we just want to put like a giant big like asterisk on this kind of stuff. So, you know, from the perspective of advisors, like sometimes these opportunities work out, but they're not guaranteed, right? So like these are exceptions to policies, and those exceptions have to be like basically agreed to by that professor. So like even Leroy putting in a good word for you, right? Like Leroy can't override that professor. So like if that professor had decided like, no, I'm really like this prereq is a prereq, then like that would have stuck and like she would have needed to go take that prereq. So Megan and I just like to make that point because sometimes students come into CCS and they're like, oh, CCS has no rules. Like I don't have to do prereqs. And that's not like the best way to think about it. So we just want to like that little, not even a footnote, right? Like
A big bolded asterisk.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. So what was important to you when you were considering colleges? What factored into your decision to attend CCS?
Well, for me, I was choosing between a bunch of different UCs. And the first one was basically choosing UCSB over other UCs was, I think I read somewhere like it had the happiest students. And I was like, I'd like to be happy for 4 years during my 4 years here. I would like to be happy and not miserable. And then, so I think UCSB was the one I was consistently hearing like, oh, everybody, like most people will be very happy here. Like there's X, Y, Z reasons why people are happy here. It's like, it's beautiful. You'll have a lot, like it's easy to make friends. It's like you're next to the beach, all that stuff. So that was one. And the second one was CCS Chem specifically. I like counted the number of faculty and counted the number of students I could find with CCS Chem in their Instagram, and it came to out down to like a super low ratio. So that was another one, like a lot of attention from your advice. You have a specific, like Leroy is going to be your advisor and you're going to have to talk to him every quarter. And from what I hear from Letters in Science, that's not as common. Like there's a lot more advising in CCS. You have a lot more individual attention from, for example, Savannah and Megan, and also Leroy, and also other professors as well. If you take, for example, a CCS bio class or a CCS physics class or math class, you're gonna know the professors by name, basically. And another one was because I knew I did not want to go into pre-med. Like I was not gonna do pre-med. So I knew I wanted to do research, and that was what CCS was like saying it was focused on. So yeah.
I think when I was choosing UCSB over the other colleges that I got into, or the other universities that I got into, it was a little bit of a no-brainer just because I didn't really want to live in any of the other places where I got into school. And also because UCSB is awesome, both in its location and its overall culture, and its academics and everything. I think that decision was really, really easy for me. And then once I heard about CCS, I looked into it a little bit, and I stand by this, did not see any downsides to joining the program. I mean, it's basically all positives. You get some smaller classes, you get more individual attention, you get a little bit more freedom in possibly taking classes where you don't meet the prereqs, asterisk attached. Let's see. Yeah. You also get a little bit more connection with the professors that you have in your classes. And you also get that freedom with some of your GEs having less stringent requirements, which was really something I was interested in because I wanted to take a whole bunch of classes and didn't want to have those be specifically chosen for me by like the LNS GE requirements that are a little bit hard to satisfy. which is my opinion as somebody who found some of the CCS gen ed requirements a little bit hard to satisfy. But yeah, I really didn't see any downsides when I was joining the program, and I don't really see any right now. So that really helped me make my decision.
Yeah, I mean, I had very similar experiences. I was looking at a lot of smaller schools, privates and stuff when I was trying to decide, because I didn't know if I wanted to go UC or not. And CCS for me was kind of perfect because it was like that smaller college benefit, but within a larger school, like a UC with resources and stuff. So that was a huge thing for me. I also was really interested in doing research, so that was another thing. And then also the flexible GEs for me, because I wanted to take lots of different types of classes. And looking at a lot of schools, they're usually very kind of like strict with your requirements you have to take for like Gs and stuff if they have them. So there was that. And then when I actually was touring UCSB, the thing that like kind of sold me was I told the story the other day on another panel. I came to UCSB over the break because it was like also my break. But there happened to be some CCS student walking out of the CCS building when I was just poking around the outside of the building. And they just randomly stopped and asked, like why we're looking around, and then just started talking to us about CCS and UCSB. They were very nice. Don't know who they were, but they were really helpful, and they were just so kind, and they told me so much, and I learned a lot in like a very short amount of time. So that kind of like finalized the decision for me. But yeah, there was a lot of other like thought and things that went along with it that were really beneficial.
Yeah, I think when you told the story the other day, I don't think I realized that like you never found out who that student was. And like now I'm just kind of imagining this like CCS recruitment ghost who like hangs out in the buildings on weekends when we're not there just to like make sure that prospective CCS students like get talked to. This is canon now. But yeah, so we have kind of our last specific question for the day. And so we've been talking about the past and like, what drew you to CCS. And so we're going to ask sort of about the future too. And some of you guys have been alluding to this a little bit. Caroline mentioned she doesn't want to go to pre-med, right? She doesn't want to go to med school. She wants to do research. So we just wanted to ask you guys kind of what are your future plans to, do with your CCS degree? And it can be like near future too, right? So like, it doesn't have to be like, oh, in 20 years, I'm going to be a professor. What are you planning on doing in the next year, 2 years?
So immediate future is for this summer, I'm just planning on doing a research internship in the Bay Area. In the future, like after graduation, most likely grad school or maybe taking a gap year to work a little bit and then doing grad school. The more people I talk to, the more it seems like if you major in a chem degree, you kind of have to do grad school, asterisk there. But yeah.
Okay, so as somebody who has recently graduated, I get this question a lot, and I'm still not very good at answering it, so bear with me, please. But as for my immediate plans, I am currently seeking employment. So if you know anybody, let them know. But I'm trying to get a position as a lab tech, working in the biotech industry right now, which is very good to have a chemistry degree for. So if you guys end up getting one of those, they're very helpful. But yeah, I'm going to be probably moving across the country to New Haven, which is a large biotech hub kind of around Yale. And just getting a job there and working for a couple of years before I eventually apply to grad school. I have a lot of friends who applied to grad school this cycle, so they would be going immediately after this year, which is something that I did not want to do, and that basically anybody who has gone to grad school immediately after finishing their undergrad will tell you explicitly not to do. I've heard almost unanimously from every single TA and professor and older person that I've ever spoken to is do not go directly from your undergrad into your grad program, take a year off, work or do something. And so that's what I've decided to do. Also because this year is kind of a weird time to start a new school with the pandemic and everything. So I'm just letting everything go back to normal and then doing that later, which is totally fine and very recommended. So yeah, consider that as your options once you've graduated.
So immediate future looking for me, hoping that I'll get into a lab for next year, obviously, get some research. This summer, I'm gonna be working as a lifeguard. I work as a lifeguard most summers. It's an outdoor job because I need to pay for college. So there's that. And then in the future, I think I would like to go to grad school. I don't know. I've kind of debated between med school and grad school for a very long time. But I'm not trying to stress myself out throughout college, focusing on trying to do like med school prereqs. So I'd definitely be taking a gap year or two to finish those prereqs / apply to whatever I decide to do. I'd also like to go traveling. I love to travel. So I'd love to take a gap year to like travel. Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm looking at. Yeah, we'll see.
I love the like travel, and I just sort of love the like general wisdom that you guys have as you're talking about your future. Yeah, I think it's like you're thinking about it in really sort of concrete and like person-centric ways. Like, what do I want as a person, and like what will make me happy? And I love hearing that from students. I think it takes a lot of maturity to get to that point. So we have moved through all of our sort of like pre-established questions, and we would love to have an opportunity either to let you ask your own questions. So if you have anything burning that we haven't addressed yet, we'd be happy to do that. I will keep recording for now, just in case like our discussion stays like super relevant, but if it gets very specific, we can certainly, we'll be cutting out things and that way you don't have to feel like, hundreds of people on YouTube are going to find out about like what you specifically love to do. But yeah, so, if you have a question, feel free to put it in chat, unmute yourself, whatever. Or, what we can also do is ask you to introduce yourselves and just talk to us about your interests too. So this is time for you guys. I need to see these cats now. I think.
Hello. Oh my God. And then I did see Zoe and Sabine's hand go up a little bit. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask or type it in the chat. And also, hello, kitty cats. Wow.
I have a few questions regarding research. So I'm Sabina, and I'm a incoming freshman for next year. And I was wondering, like, how qualified you need to be to apply for internships and research jobs, because I was wondering if I could do that as a freshman, or would I need a few classes before I'm like ready to do it?
I don't think you need too much, because the whole idea of a research university is you come in not knowing anything and you will learn how to. Like, there's a lot of the internships from CSEP, for example, don't require prior research information. They just require you to like want to do research, and they'll help you. It's because it doesn't really make sense for a research university to have labs that require previous experience, because if you're coming fresh from high school, like where would you get that experience, basically? So from that regard, it's easy to jump into research at UCSB. If you want to do the more competitive programs that like pay you money, basically, like $6,000 a summer or something like that, it's not a requirement to do prior research, but considering the competitive pool you're in, it's probably better to do research before you apply. In those cases, the best course is just go to UCSB, like try getting into non-paying research as fast as you can. So just like email around labs and it's like, hey, I'm interested, can I do it? And by the time summer comes around and those applications start opening up, you can apply to those if you want to. But overall, not a lot of requirement needed. Like I started without having even finished my first lab in UCSB.
Yeah, and I think that kind of applies to a lot of like research opportunities and internships and jobs, is that even if you don't have like the theoretical knowledge base going in, like the purpose of the research is to teach you, obviously. So basically anytime you start any position like that, whoever's supervising you is going to teach you the duties of the position that you're going to have, and also probably try to build your basis of theoretical knowledge that the research is based off of anyway. So don't let a little bit of inexperience dissuade you from applying for positions like that, especially because, you know, once you're in the position, you're going to be in a situation where you're constantly surrounded by that type of information, and you'll learn a lot and pick it up really quickly.
Thank you. And then I also have one more question. Like, how efficient is research? Like, are any of you published, or like, do the professors have a lot of publications?
My PI specifically is pretty published. I think he's I think he has an H index of like, I don't remember what it was, but I remember being like, oh, that's a really high H index when I looked it up. But yeah, most professors here are pretty well known, I would say. Specifically for chem or biochem, you're probably not going to go wrong. It's still good to like ask around, like if the lab's going to be a good fit for you, but you shouldn't be worrying about the reputation of the professor. For publishing as an undergrad, it seems like I will be published personally at some point this summer or next year, fingers crossed, but a lot of it's luck. Like you could be in a lab for 4 years and not get published, or you could be in the lab the first year and get published. It depends kind of on the project you're in and how lucky it is with the results you get. So yeah, it's hard to say.
I mean, I haven't been in a lab, but just from what I've heard, I think that's all very true. I think a lot of professors are definitely mostly have some publications of some sort. All their websites should have like their past publications on them. So when you like research the lab, you should always be able to see when they were last published / how often they publish, or like what they're working on. But oftentimes they're always pretty rigorous and have lots of stuff on there, except for maybe some of the newer labs, but those are also really beneficial because then you're starting kind of with a newer professor who has like tons of new stuff, you know, they're working on. So having tons of publications isn't necessarily a great thing. You can also have a great experience. Something I've also heard from older students is that they said you have to want to talk to people if you can from the lab a lot of times, because there are different like lab environments, obviously. And sometimes something like publications won't really tell you what your experience will be like in a lab or how beneficial it'll be for you. Less publications, but maybe a better professor who's more connected and could get you more connections later on in your career might be better. So there's kind of like a range of things to think about, but I think overall, like most professors will have publications, and there's a good likelihood, I'd say, you might be published if you're working in a lab for a consistent amount of time with somebody.
Oh, to hop on Thea's point, there's also senior theses. What's it called? Thesis projects. So I think there's a specific class code you have to put in for, is there a specific class code you have to put in for CCS or a senior thesis project, or would you go into letters and science for that?
Sometimes there are classes for thesis projects, like if you're doing like independent studies, especially, and things like that. And then like I know that for the chemistry and biochemistry program, there's like 4 different degrees really that you guys can pursue, like in terms of tracks, right? Like you all either can receive a BA or a BS. That's actually something we haven't talked about. And so that might have to do with like how much coursework you are doing for your major. And then there's also like, are you doing sort of a primarily chemistry or like biochemistry? So there's some flexibility within the chemistry program specifically too, so that, you know, the way that you go through your major might reflect what your interests are and the work that you put in.
Yeah, but for the senior thesis project, if you specifically really want to get published as an undergrad, Another thing you could possibly do is sign up for a senior thesis, because the whole idea of it, I don't quote me on this because I only heard about it in lab when my PI asked me if I want to do it. So I don't actually know exactly what it is. But from what I hear, it sounds like a project you do your senior / and or junior year, where you're basically just working on a research project and the goal of it is to get out with a paper. Like that seems to be what it is. Megan and Savannah, please correct me if I'm wrong. But if it's like senior year and like you're like you really want to get published, it's probably better for you to do research before then, but that is an option.
I would say like even Megan and I probably don't feel 100% comfortable answering this question, because I think this will be something that like a student really talks about with their faculty advisor. And that would be true in any major, right? Like whatever senior projects CCS students get themselves into, or junior projects and sophomore projects, it really is with the advice of your faculty advisor. So for chemistry, that's Dr. Laverman. And so, you know, this is where like the CCS model of having a faculty advisor to talk to about your major progress is really special and unique, that you have a faculty member to talk with you about like your interests and how those interests play into your degree requirements, and then also like how they play into your plans for the future. So yeah, so this is part of where like Megan and I are sort of college advisors. So we help out with kind of some of the big picture questions and like making sure that you guys are not going so far off, you know, that you forget about the other things that you're required to do for a UCSB degree. But the sort of major specific, like research specific stuff, that's where, you know, you really benefit from having someone who is, you know, a straight up faculty member talking to you about those ideas.
Zoe, you had some questions.
Yeah, hi, I'm Zoe. I was just wondering if, I know that UCSB goes by the quarter system, and my sister went to UCLA, which does the quarter system, and it was a lot for her. So I was just wondering if like the transition from high school to like UCSB's quarter system was like difficult to like adjust to.
I don't think I had like a difficult time adjusting from semesters to quarters. I do think that the quarter system is very fast paced, and a lot of people do kind of get swept up in that. And I have personally gotten swept up in that before. But it really just means that you have to always kind of be on top of everything, because you will have a midterm every 2 weeks sometimes. If you're taking like 4 or 5 classes, like you will sometimes have a midterm every week, like a midterm or a test every week. And it really just means that like if you fall behind, you're kind of in a very bad position. And it's really easy to fall behind too. So definitely like scheduling things and planning things and making sure you are on top of your stuff at all times is kind of like one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give you going into the quarter system. And just remember that it ends really fast. Like for some reason, week 8 and 9 always sneak up on you. So just be prepared for when that happens. Yeah, and use Google Calendars. Use Google Calendars for sure.
Part of it is also asking around, because usually if you're doing a major class, there's probably 1 or 2 professors that are offered to take that class at a given time. Sometimes if you want to avoid the 1 midterm every week situation, you can ask around either your classmates who've already taken the class or upperclassmen and ask how that professor structures the class. And if you're choosing between a professor who does like 1 midterm every 2 weeks, I'm thinking about a specific situation where that happened, or no midterm and the final is optional or something like that. I know what I would pick, but another case is the quarter system can get easier once you know how to like pick your classes right, and also how to, like, you're always going to feel slightly out of breath on the quarter system no matter what. Like it doesn't matter how long you're in it. It's like 10 weeks is not enough, but you can learn how to make it easier, basically.
I think that's all really true. I will say when I started as a freshman, like I didn't fall super behind or anything. I think I did have a slight shock where I was like, oh, this is really fast, but like it wasn't detrimental or anything. It was just kind of like realizing, okay, this is like how much work I need to do a week or etc. The main thing I'd say is like don't underestimate it coming in. Just kind of like I would say overestimate it and like a little bit at first to get used to it, because it is a little slight adjustment. But I think it's fine. I mean, I've been a student. My second quarter there, I had, I think, a midterm every week from week 3 through week 9. So everyone's done it. It's fine. Yeah, there are different ways you can try and avoid that or let it happen. I don't know. But kind of what Megan said, definitely schedule everything in. Yeah, I was with rowing. I was like, okay, I'm at the lake from 5:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. and like then I have to go to APC and then I have to go eat breakfast and then I have my class. Like I very much did blocks of time, so I knew where I would be and what I had to do.
I'll just say that I've run orientation programs for CCS students for the past 3 summers, and we really hammer it in during orientation. Like it's gonna not look like a lot when you're signing up for classes here at orientation, because what you're used to is 6 to 7 classes in a day, every day. And so what we try to really impress upon you in orientation is you might be looking at 3 classes on your schedule, but it is okay because this is your adjustment quarter. So we try to like tell you like use this quarter to see what it's like, to see how fast it is. And then in your second quarter, go for it, see how much you can take and like really go crazy. But we try to build in like it's going to be an adjustment, doing your own laundry and like going to get your meals and all that stuff. So we really try to help in that first quarter to like be like, it's okay to only have 3 classes in your first quarter. Just get used to college and then go for it. So
Yeah.
we try our best.
Yeah, in addition to that, like I think Caroline was saying this, like there's like quite a breadth in the difficulty of the same classes offered by different professors. And I would like to say that a lot of the times the difficulty of the course is not directly correlated to the quality of the instruction, not necessarily. So taking the hardest class you can is not always going to be the best option. And definitely like adding on to what Megan said, is like, please do not take 5 or 6 classes every quarter. I know I would do this every quarter, is I would get on Gold and I would look at all of the classes that I could take and all of the ones that I wanted to take. And I would get very excited by them because I think they're all super interesting and cool. And I would sign up for 5 or 6 classes. And for the first 3 weeks, I would be attending and I would love them. And they're so awesome. And then always sometime around week 4, I would have way too much work and way too many things to do. And usually what I would end up doing is be overwhelmed and end up dropping a class, which is never fun. And, you know, it's generally just always better to undershoot and be able to handle everything and have spare time than to underestimate the amount of work that you're going to have from your classes and be overwhelmed. Guarantee that you're going to have more fun if you are able to handle more than the amount of classes you take.
Yeah, adding on to what Max said, I wouldn't recommend, like it's different for each person, but on the high end, I wouldn't recommend taking more than 18 units. So 1 unit generally corresponds with 3 hours of work in a week. In the beginning of the pandemic, I was like, great, everything's online. I can handle more classes. I took 23 units and I hated myself. Do not, like, my general advice is don't take more than 18 units. If you end up dropping a class, I remember during my orientation, the advice is to like, especially if you ask for an ad code in the beginning, to email your professor and just be courteous about it, because because CCS has a good reputation, it makes it a little bit easier for us to add classes with the instructor's permission. But if the instructor had previous bad experiences with CCS students dropping class like halfway through and just ghosting, it's not gonna be nice for the underclassmen who come up after you. So generally, it's okay to drop class, but just email the professor beforehand and just explain why.
Yeah, also adding on to the unit to hours conversion thing, I know that the rule of thumb is 3 hours, but in my historical experience, this is untrue. It varies so much from class to class. Like, I know that it's like the thing that the advisors will tell you and your professors will tell you, but it is generally not true. Like, it's kind of just a lie. Like, sure, if you spread your classes out in all your different majors, like, I'm sure that it might average out to about 3 hours. But what I will tell you right now is that there are some classes where one unit is 5 or 6 hours of work at least. Like, I have had lab classes where those, because lab classes are 3 units instead of 4, and those I will take one lab class and maybe 3 other classes that quarter, and the lab class will take up 80% of my week. So I just really want you guys to be wary of the fact that units are basically in no way, shape, or form correlated to the amount of hours and the amount of work that you will put into the class. Like, I'm sorry to spill this secret, Megan and Savannah, but like really, I just want them to know, like, that the units do not correlate to the amount of work. It really is more of a factor of the professor you have, the field of study that it's in, and what type of class it is more than anything else. Like, a 3-unit chemistry lab will almost certainly always be worth more, or will take up more of your time than like a 5-unit like literature course or anything like that. Like, it's just true. Like, it will always take up much more time than you think it will. So even if your units are kind of low, like, just be aware of the fact that they really do not correlate very well to the amount of work that you will be putting into those classes.
Another thing, just right to go with that, is that often things like labs, you're like required to be in the classroom for some amount of time a week that is longer than, let's say, a normal lecture. And then on top of that, it's often more work outside of class, despite, let's say, the units only being like 2 or 3. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind, because labs are kind of a killer. And then yeah, but things like GEs and stuff, on the other hand, sometimes are really easy and you barely spend any time on them at all. So it very much differs.
Another thing about the lab is that they're curved to a B average, which is helpful in the beginning of the lab. But as you move on and everybody improves, it adds stress to it, which is why people spend more time on it. Like, I feel like curving the lab classes makes people worse people, because you start comparing. You don't think, oh, I got like 90%. This is awesome. You think, oh, I got 1 point below average. This is awful. I need to spend more time. So that's also part of the reason why lab classes are so time consuming and also stressful, but you learn to deal with it eventually. Like, it somewhere between week 1 and week 3, it just becomes like white noise in the background, and you're like, okay, you just do all the work.
I think I'm gonna temporarily, and maybe not temporarily, put a little bit of a pin in this, just because it is 3 o'clock, and I want to make sure that we respect all of your time as panelists, because you volunteered to be here, and we super duper appreciate that. So like Thea's, recruitment ghost is pretty much you guys. It's people who are like, you know what, I love CCS so much, I just want to talk about it for fun, and that we think speaks really highly of us as well, that like we don't really have to go out and like really like beat the bushes, or in order to like find students who are willing to talk about our program, and so we just want to recognize that. We want to thank you for it. It's something that we genuinely appreciate. We want to let everyone who's here know that if you have questions, you can certainly get in touch with us. So Megan and I, our emails are on the CCS website. You can get in touch with us. You can also email our student assistants at info@ccs.ucsb.edu, and they're very used to answering a lot of questions, talking about their experience, because they're students as well, and just helping to answer questions in general, or connect you up with people if they're not able to answer something directly. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we really want to touch on, Megan. I will say, clearly CCS students have a range of experience and wisdom to share. So like, especially if you decide to SIR at CCS, don't let this be the last opportunity for you to talk to CCS students about their experience, because Sophomores have great advice for first years. Seniors have great advice for sophomores. So it keeps going, and you keep connecting with the community and getting new ideas and having some, exciting things come your way. Or even just, stories of like, I did this and I severely regret it. Please don't do that. That could be super valuable too. So, don't sell that short either. I'll hang out for a minute just in case anybody has any more questions, but we just want to thank you for your time and thank you to our panelists. So, we genuinely appreciate your time. All right, I'm going to stop my recording and